I opened the door and immediately knew something was off. Two men in police uniforms stood at my doorstep, but their badges looked strange. They claimed I had serious problems and demanded an immediate fine payment. But the moment I started recording on my phone and mentioned my profession, their smug expressions instantly changed. What happened next felt like a scene straight out of a crime thriller. But let's start from the beginning. John Miller was not a man who could be easily intimidated. 15 years as a lawyer had taught him to recognize lies at first glance, dismantle them piece by piece, and turn them against the liars themselves. He had dealt with fraudsters in the courtroom, but exposing them in a trial was one thing. Meeting them face to face at his own doorstep was something entirely different. When a sharp knock echoed through his apartment, he instinctively frowned. It was the kind of knock that came from people used to giving orders, not asking for permission. "Open up, police!" The voice was firm, but it lacked the authoritative confidence of a real officer. John didn't rush. He took a deep breath, quickly assessed the situation. There was no reason for the police to be at his door, which meant this was either a mistake or something was very, very wrong. When he opened the door, two men stood before him. They were dressed in police uniforms, but something about them felt off. The first man was tall, broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and a badge that gleamed unnaturally under the light. John knew exactly what real police credentials looked like. This badge looked like a cheap knockoff. The second man was stockier, with a thick mustache and a cocky, slightly narrowed gaze. He didn't carry himself like a real cop, more like a bouncer who had been handed a uniform but hadn't yet learned how to wear it properly. "Mr. Miller, we need to have a serious conversation," the mustached man said, deliberately pulling out a small notepad. A theatrical gesture meant to create an illusion of authority. "We've received complaints, violations of the HOA regulations." John didn't flinch. "What kind of complaints?" The bald man didn't even glance at the notepad. "Unauthorized parking and unpaid dues." John exhaled slowly. He knew this neighborhood, knew the HOA rules better than the board members themselves. His car had been parked in the same designated spot for years, exactly as per the regulations. Every fee was paid in advance. "There must be some mistake," he said evenly, though a flicker of tension crossed his eyes. "I have all the receipts." But the two men at his door didn't even blink. "We don't care," the mustached man said lazily, as if the matter had already been settled. "If you don't pay the fine right now, we'll have to call a tow truck and take this to court." John clenched his jaw. A fine? For a violation that didn't exist? His fingers went cold, but he didn't show it. This wasn't a mistake. It was a scam. Simple, yet effective. They went door to door, found vulnerable targets, intimidated them with legal jargon, and collected fines in cash. But today, they had picked the wrong person, and they had no idea just how big of a mistake they had just made. John didn't waste time on emotions. He knew that the most powerful weapon against scammers wasn't fear nor aggression. It was cold, unwavering confidence. He took a step forward, crossing his arms over his chest, his gaze turning to ice. "All right." His voice was calm, but there was steel in that calmness. "Then let's do this by the book. State your name, rank, and badge number." The bald man hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but John caught it. Then, clearly deciding that the game wasn't lost yet, he forced out, "Officer Thompson." "And him?" John nodded slowly toward the mustached man. "Officer Rodriguez," the other replied, a little less convincingly. John nodded, pulled out his phone, and without another word started recording. The screen lit up. The camera pointed directly at them. "Perfect. I'll just document this." The words, spoken with deliberate casualness, hung in the air. A flicker of tension crossed the officers' faces. So, Officers Thompson and Rodriguez, John said evenly, holding his phone so that every movement was captured. You claim that I violated HOA regulations and are demanding payment for a fine. Just to clarify, do you have a warrant or an official order? The reaction was immediate. The bald man's jaw tightened slightly, his eyes darting to the side for a split second as if looking for an escape. The mustached man, on the other hand, avoided eye contact entirely, his smug confidence evaporating in an instant. Why are you recording? His voice turned rougher, the calmness gone. John didn't blink. For evidence. His voice was ice. Because what you're doing is called fraud and impersonating a law enforcement officer. That's a criminal offense. Silence. The mustached man swallowed hard, forcing a stiff smile. Look, let's not make this a big deal. He took a nervous step back, but the camera was still rolling. We're just doing our job. John let out a sharp, predatory smirk, his eyes narrowing. This isn't a job. He cut him off coldly, stepping forward. It's a crime. And at that moment, their masks began to crack. The bald man dropped his tough act, now looking like someone who had just realized he had made a critical mistake. The mustached man darted his eyes around nervously, scanning for witnesses, and John savored the moment, because now they were afraid. The bald man shot a quick glance at the stocky one, and John recognized it instantly. He had seen that look thousands of times in the courtroom, the look of someone who just realized they were caught. The mustached man swallowed nervously, forcing a crooked smile. We just wanted to settle this amicably, he muttered, avoiding eye contact. Settle it? John took a step forward, deliberately closing the distance. Then stay right where you are. I'm calling the police. He lifted his finger and pressed dial. Ring. The bald man took a sharp step back, his shoulders tensing. Hey, no, wait. There's no need to take it that far. The mustached man started inching backward, his voice losing its former arrogance. But John didn't let them out of his sight. It's already gone that far. A split second, and panic erupted. The bald man cursed under his breath, his fingers loosening as his fine book slipped from his grip and landed on the pavement with a dull thud. Without another word, he spun around and started walking away, fast. The mustached man followed, his steps just as hurried. Stop! John barked, but they were already running. They thought they could escape, but then, as if by fate, a real patrol officer stepped out from the alleyway. Full uniform, upright posture, a real badge gleaming under the streetlight. He saw the two men sprinting. Then he saw John standing firm with his phone still recording. And in that instant, everything changed. Officer! John's voice shattered the silence like a gunshot. He thrust his hand forward, pointing directly at the two fleeing conmen. Those two were impersonating police officers and extorting money. The real patrol officer snapped into action instantly. Stop! Hands up! His voice cracked through the air like thunder. The bald man skidded to a halt so abruptly that he nearly tripped. His body jerked, instinct screaming at him to keep running, but his legs refused to obey. This is a mistake. We were just... But words meant nothing now. Click. Handcuffs locked around his wrists. Click. The stocky man followed, his face twisting into sheer panic as the realization hit. There was no way out. A heavy silence settled over the scene. Only the ragged breathing of the fraudsters, the faint crackle of the officer's radio, and the slow, deliberate thud of boots against asphalt remained. John stood still, watching as the conmen were loaded into the patrol car. Their eyes darted wildly, from despair to fear. All that remained for them now was the crushing weight of their own failure. But John felt no satisfaction in their fear, only a deep, undeniable sense of justice served. This day could have ended differently. but it ended exactly as it should have. Justice had prevailed.